What are you doing now, and what are you trying to get promoted to? Talk me through it. Or you just here because you've heard I'm wonderful and you'll come see me do anything. That's also possible. James?
Yeah, I'm trying to get from senior manager to director. Understanding that there's a couple different paths to that, but I think the preference would be to be a people manager, a manager of other reference managers, other customer advocacy, like a team of customer advocacy managers.
Gotcha. What have you tried so far, James, in your bid to make that move, if anything?
Well, I think it's weird to categorize it as like something I've tried. I think it's always just been something I've been working towards, but taking the incremental steps, I feel like I've done a good job of like showing the value of the program, showing that I can only scale so much as one person.
Yep.
Given me someone underneath advocacy specialist to manage, which is great. What I'm worried of is that they won't give me the resulting bump. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, you're doing great as a senior manager with other people below you, So I think maybe it's proving the value of that, or maybe that's just a point of just asking at the right time. So I know there's a lot of it is just context and it depends, but
yeah, so the role that you're looking to get into is not one that necessarily exists. You want to create a new role and then fill it yourself, is what you're saying.
yeah. And I think another thing about that, what I've tried, Plan View is also doing something across all marketing where it's like asking each team to give a roadmap or a role, like we're clearly defining each role and each level within that role, which is huge. Like that's a green flag for me, right? Like, and they've asked me to take a look at like, okay, advocacy, how far does it go up? Is there a VP of advocacy? What's a specialist versus manager versus senior manager versus director, which is a senior director? So just by doing that, I'm encouraged, but still I'm worried that like that's all well and good, but then when the rubber hits the road, what will happen? So
yeah. Well, interesting. So I know, Kaylee, we're going to get started here in a minute, but James, there's sort of two big parts to you making that promotion happen. We're going to talk about half of that in today's presentation, but during the Q&A, we can chat a little more about the kind of the making the job part, which is going to be fun and nerdy, but we'll talk more about that later.
Well, awesome. I think there's still a couple folks with audio troubles, but we can go ahead and get started. I don't have too much to say other than I'm glad that you guys are here and, happy that we're able to, provide this session with Holly. I've been working with Holly for around 5 months now, and it has really, really improved my perception of my own kind of trajectory, but also ability to communicate my strengths. And so I'm excited to get to, share her as a resource with you all. And from here, I will let her take over and we'll get rolling.
All right. Okay, friends, I'm just gonna make the PowerPoint magic happen. Just give me a sec here. All right, can you all see that? Someone give me a nod. Yeah, great, perfect. Okay. Let me hide all these Zoom controls so they don't just nonstop bother me the whole time we're here. All right, friends, now I have the unfortunate reality of a teeny tiny office with a teeny tiny desk and only one monitor. So y'all please chat away in the chat and know that I will have blissfully no idea what is going on there, and I will catch up with you when we're done. So please chat. And I love anybody who's on camera. If you can give me a nod every once in a while, that's good, because that's the only way I can monitor y'all right now. Okay, so let's get started with how to set yourself up for promotion in 2024. This is a topic, like so many topics that I speak on, a topic that I'm really excited to talk about today, something I'm incredibly nerdy about. I could probably talk for 6 hours. I've done my best here to sort of distill this into what I hope will be 4 key things that you can do to improve your chances of promotion on top of what I think the base case is that most of us are doing. If you really ask me to lay this out, there might be another 30 steps or tips I could give you, but here's the big 4. Here's the big 4 today. And we'll go through that, and then we'll get into more detail in the Q&A for anything that y'all have that isn't covered here. So for those of you who don't already know me, my name is Holly. I'm a leadership coach for women in male-dominated industries. I've been doing this now for 7 years. And prior to my life as a leadership coach, I worked in the mining industry. I was a mining engineer for years. I also worked for a mining software company, doing that weird unholy alliance between the very, very advanced tech industry and the incredibly, literally Stone Age mining industry. And so I really, really love working myself in a technical capacity in these types of fields. I think they're incredibly fun and incredibly nerdy. And also in the course of building my career as an incredibly ambitious person in these industries, I ran into sort of roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, and decided to sort of step out and start to work on some of these systemic issues that I see that women encounter all the time in the workplace. And the great news is there's tons of work that I do that's specifically applicable to women, and also lots of things that work for women to build their careers also work for people of all genders. So for folks who are going, this talk is not for me, don't worry. This is all for you. This is for everybody. But this is just sort of my focus. Now, I'm going to use today a fun little promotion meter device, almost like, when you go on LinkedIn and you build your profile and they tell you how well you're doing and they encourage you to add sections. We're going to do the same thing and encourage you to sort of add sections to your bid for a promotion. And the idea here is to help you go from 0 all the way to 100. And we're going to start here at 0. And the reason that we're starting at 0 is because most of us try to get promotions like this. Literally not at all. We don't even ask. Okay. This is how most of us do it. We just sort of wait. We hope that somebody's going to notice us, tap us on the head and go, it's you. I choose you, Pikachu. You're the one for me. Right. And 56% of us actually have never asked for a promotion. This comes from a 2014 study from Accenture. So the majority of us haven't asked over our entire careers, haven't asked for a promotion. And so our official strategy of those 56% is just to wait until it gets offered. And, nod of heads or in the chat or raise a hand. How many of y'all have used this strategy or even are currently using this strategy going, they'll tell me when I'm ready? Some hands up. Yeah, exactly. Really, really common. I've used this strategy before and it occasionally works. But the only problem is for women in particular, only 57% of us have ever been offered a promotion. Not like we have a 57% chance on any given promotion, just over our entire careers, 57% of us have once been offered a promotion. Now for men, surprise, surprise, this number is much better, 76%. But again, folks, these aren't how many people get promotions every time they want them. These are the numbers who have ever gotten one this way in their career. So there's a good, 43% to 24% of us for whom the strategy just doesn't work. And even if you are in the group of people for whom this strategy has worked, you may not necessarily want to get your promotion according to your boss's whims or on their timeline. So yikes, not ideal, right? Great when it works out, but not really a strategy that has us in full control. But the good news, friends, is that 68% of people who ask for a promotion actually get one. Yay, hooray, we have good chances. So let's bring us to step number 1, which is actually tell your boss you want a promotion. The words have to come out of your mouth directly. You have to tell them what you want and by when. So throughout this presentation, friends, I'm going to be giving you a whole bunch of sort of little scripts. I'm going to stick a bunch of words in your mouth. If you don't like them, spit them out. But I'll give you a whole bunch of different ways that you can have these conversations. So feel free to screenshot and stick these in a Word doc as we go. But here's your first one. So you're going to say to your boss something along the lines of, hey, boss, I want to move into such and such role by such and such timeline, and I'd like your help to do it. Really, really simple. But if you forget this step, then you'll be relegated to that 57 to 75% who are waiting and hoping for your boss to pat you on the head. So this step alone will give you a lot more control over whether or not your promotion is actually likely to happen. Oh, and by the way, on this note, I worked with a woman earlier this year. I had a call with her in April. And she said to me, hey, you know what? My performance review just happened. I got a really good review and I was kind of expecting my boss to, give me that next promotion, but he didn't. So I guess I'll wait till next time. And I said, stop, hold on, go back. Like we do not pass go, do not collect $200. We're going to go back and have that conversation. And so she went and talked to her boss and said, hey, I actually really want to be made a VP. I've done this, I've done this, and here's why I think it would be good for the company. And he goes, oh, I didn't know you wanted it. Yeah, we can do that, no problem. And 2 weeks later, she had the promotion. So I know this seems like really pat. It's like, okay, Holly, off to a slow start. Like, yeah, we got to ask. I know. But I'm telling you, this can really be the difference between you and the next roll up and you and usually several $1,000s worth of raise. So make sure you ask, make sure you don't leave this part out. All right, so we're at 25% now on our promotion meter. Yay, amazing. Let's see what step number 2 is. So step number 2 is to get feedback. Not all of us will have the story that my client from earlier had, where she just got given the promotion just because she'd asked, because her boss had never thought of it before and went, oh, that actually is a good idea. A lot of us, when we ask initially, we'll sort of go, well, you're almost there, but you're not quite, and you'll need to do some work to get there. So we need to get some feedback to figure out what that looks like. So, you know, we might sit there and go, hey, boss, what skills do I need for this job? And our boss is going to say something like, oh, Holly, improve your leadership skills. And we're sitting there going, what does that even mean? Improve my leadership skills. Which skills? What part? Improve how? How do I do that? How do I action on that? If I come back in 6 months, will I have done it if I go do these 10 things? What do you really need from me, right? Who here has been on the receiving end of feedback that's been kind of maddeningly vague from their boss about this kind of thing? Yeah, I see a couple hands up. I've been there as well. Usually the feedback for me is that I have a bad personality. It's very helpful for me to get a promotion. And I've never been successful at changing it, surprisingly. But anyways, so we need to be able to get detailed, actually useful feedback, even when we have a boss for whom that doesn't come naturally. Because for a lot of our bosses, this is not something that they do particularly well. I spend lots of time in my leadership coaching practice working with leaders around specifically this. You know, they go, oh, I need this person to have a little more executive presence. And I go, okay, what do you mean by executive presence? Oh, you know, like more command of the room. Okay, how do you want them to command a room? I can spend easily, you know, 30, 40 minutes, an hour with a leader, often on a single piece of feedback to help them learn the skill of making it a little more detailed. So this is incredibly common, and probably more often than not, you'll be working with a boss who doesn't have a particularly strong muscle in this area. So let's talk about how to make it a little more detailed and a little more useful for you so that you can actually do the things that you need to do to fill the gap to get promoted. So useful feedback has got 3 main elements. Useful feedback contains information about the specific behavior that either you're doing or they want you to be doing, ideally both sides, right? So this is something that, you know, if you wrote this down on a to-do list, you could actually achieve, right? So improve leadership, not specific enough. Delegate 50% of the things on my task list, something you could do, right? So we want highly specific information around the behaviors as you're doing them now or as they want them to be. We also want to understand what the impact is going to be. So what the ideal effect is of the behavior they're trying to get you to do. So this is going to help you understand sort of the scale and the reason for the work. But one thing that you'll notice as we go through this presentation, sometimes when we're having conversations with our boss and we're looking for information, sometimes we're looking for information for ourselves, but actually, shh, don't tell your boss. A lot of the time, we're trying to get our boss to say it out loud so that they think about it for the first time. It's a way of kind of tricking them into getting onto our side of our point of view about these things. So part of the reason I want you to understand the impact is so that you get, what's the business reason I'm doing this? Why is it important that I develop this behavior? But it's also because I want the boss to have to articulate that. You'll find quite often, especially if you come from sort of if you have any intersecting identities that come from a marginalized background, you're going to find that sometimes the feedback that you get is not always the most important thing. Sometimes it will be, but it won't always be. And so asking questions to help them understand kind of what's the impact will really help untangle some of those complex feedback knots that we can get into, like what I mentioned earlier. Hey, Holly, work on your personality. Okay, what's the business impact of that going to be? A question like that will really help your boss start to decode like, oh, why am I asking that? What is the impact? Okay, and then the third ingredient that we're going to have in useful feedback is an understanding of the importance, right? What can happen all the time is bosses will sort of give us the laundry list of things. Oh, here's my list of ways I'd perfect you as a human being so that you'd be the ideal worker for me on my team, right? I don't know if anybody's ever gotten that where you've sort of, you know, all of us are individuals and bosses can only give feedback from their point of view, but every once in a while you get feedback that's like, ooh, this is really about how to make it easy for you to work with me, but I don't know that this is broadly applicable. If I worked at another org or under a different boss, this might not be as crucial, right? So I want you to get an understanding of what the importance is of every item of feedback that you get. Is this something that has to happen? Otherwise, I'm not doing my job currently well and I'm in danger of getting fired. Is this a nice to have? Is this something that makes it easier for you and I to work together? Is this something that all directors at the next level up have to be doing, and if I don't have it, I'll just never get a yes on a promotion or in an interview? Or is this, and I've gotten feedback like this quite often, feedback that you think will help me in my long-term career for a dream that you have for me, but that I don't particularly had. Back when I was a mining engineer, I had a ton of bosses give me what they felt was very useful feedback around how to become an expert technical mining engineering consultant, because they felt, you know, she's nerdy, she likes data, this is going to be great for her, right? And that is true, but what I loved was actually people work. I wanted to move into people management, and lo and behold, here I am now, a coach doing the most people-y business I could possibly do. And so they gave me lots of really good advice about how to get into a career that I didn't want, but if I didn't want it, it wasn't that helpful. So understanding kind of what that importance is and what that impact is can help you really understand how and where to prioritize the feedback that you get. Okay, so these 3 elements are going to be essential. And what you're going to do, because your boss is almost certainly not going to give you all 3 of these, or maybe not even any of these, is you're going to start to ask questions to help your boss be more specific in these 3 areas. So I'll walk you through some examples. I said earlier I was going to put some words in your mouth. Here they come. Okay, so we'll start with behavior. So 4 questions you can ask. There's more questions you can ask, but here's 4 to get you started to help understand what behavior your boss is pointing at is, so what specific actions do you observe me doing around whatever skill it is that you're discussing that work, and what doesn't work? So asking for specific actions, right, that are good and bad. And then, do you have any examples of whatever behavior they're trying to describe? This one occasionally can come across as sort of defensive. You've got to watch your tone on this one. Like, you don't want to, oh, do you have any examples, right? You want to, if you preface this with, oh, interesting, I'd like to learn more, or hey, I'm curious, do you have any examples of that? Or help me understand, do you have any examples of that? That'll help that land a little better. Sometimes examples can be really helpful. Another one is to sort of look into the future. Okay, if I was already doing this well, if I was doing this at a 10 out of 10, what would it look like? Show me what good is, right? And number 4, what behavior or actions would you like to see out of me to be sure that this was addressed? So if I was successful doing this and 6 months from now, we were having a conversation about what a wild success I was at improving this skill, what would be the behaviors and actions that I'd be doing at that time so that you could feel confident going, oh yeah, Holly's got this. So these questions are sort of split across 2 different things. The ones on the top are sort of around how's it going now, right? And the ones on the bottom are about how's it going in the future. It's really important for you to ask questions around both. Quite often we'll focus mostly on what's going on now, but it can be really instructive to ask, what does good look like? Okay, so anybody who hasn't taken a screenshot, now's your moment. I'm about to switch screens. These will disappear forever. Okay, so that's useful feedback around behavior. Now let's take a look around impact. So again, we've got a couple little scripts for you. So number 1 is, what would happen if I was successful at this? What would the effect on the business be? If this worked, then what? Then you could ask, okay, what reaction would this behavior or skill elicit from the team, from senior management, or from my peers, or really whoever they think it's going to affect? What do you think the impact of this behavior is on my chances of moving into blah, blah, blah role by next year? This is a question that I love because it forces your boss to really consider whether or not and how this is essential to your ability to perform the next thing. So really useful for sorting out that sort of helpful feedback, but not necessarily helpful to you thing that happens all the time. And then another way of putting it is, what are the consequences if this doesn't change? And again, tone is going to be key on this one. You don't want to ask this like a petulant teenager. Most of you aren't petulant teenagers with your bosses anyways in meetings, I'm sure. But ask this one with the, you know, the wide-eyed wonder of a brand new, you know, baby animal come fresh to the earth. Oh, what are the consequences if this doesn't change? Okay, 4 pieces that you can have to assess what the impact is going to be of this particular skill they want you to develop. Then, third, we're going to look at what the importance is. So we can start by asking, ironically, how significant an impact is that? So this seems like it's a question about impact, but it's actually really about sort of ranking it and stratifying it within the others. How significant is that, right? Then, do you consider this a big priority for my development? Another way of sorting out whether this matters more than something else. Is this do or die? A very dramatic way to ask, boss, if I don't do this, am I going to get fired? And what makes this thing that you're asking about here a priority over this other thing that we've talked about previously? Okay, so all of these questions here are ways of helping you prioritize the feedback, but also crucially, remember, friends, it's not just about helping you prioritize that feedback. It's about helping your boss prioritize that feedback. You want them to start to sort of build an operational plan in their head of like, how's this supposed to work? Where should they be doing this? What should I be asking for? Okay, so these 3 key elements that we've got to help make our feedback more useful, more detailed, less maddeningly vague, work on your executive presence, build your leadership skills. Okay, so now we're at 50%. Woohoo, almost there. We've told our boss we want it. We've asked them what we need to do to get there, which, by the way, is a great step, friends. Way better to just ask for the cheat sheet than to guess, right? Say, hey, what do you need to see out of me to make this happen? So we've covered those 2 steps. Now, step number 3 is kind of another version of step number 2, but we're going to benchmark our performance. So by benchmark our performance, what I mean is that, remember how I mentioned earlier, bosses can sort of come up with a laundry list of things? What we want to be able to do is mitigate the risk of them coming up with a laundry list. And also, ironically, mitigate the list of them coming up with almost nothing. Have any of us been in a situation with your boss where you go, hey boss, how am I doing? And they go, great. You go, any feedback for me? And they go, no, you're doing great. You're going, can I get promoted? Well, I don't know. Cool, boss. How do I make that work, right? Like there's not enough in that for me, right? And so benchmarking your performance against a known standard is really going to help your boss come up with a right-sized and correctly directed amount of feedback for you and help both of you have sort of an agreed upon standard that you can use to move forward. So what we don't want to have happen is go, hey, boss, I've improved my leadership, so I'm ready for my promotion, right? Looking like that Natalie Portman meme. And then the boss goes, well, I don't know, not quite. There's one more thing we need, right? We want to make sure that rather than sitting here dying after a year of effort, realizing that we still got one more thing to do and now we're one more promotion cycle away, we've got all the feedback to start. So what I want you to do is go and find a job listing for the job that you want. So some of y'all may have internal job postings or leveling docs at your company. If you've got those, great, go get them. Make friends with HR, ask where those are, get them off of the company, internal servers, wherever you find them. And if you don't have these, or if, like someone mentioned earlier, you're making up a new role, then what you want to do is go out on the internet, go to Indeed, go to LinkedIn, go to places where you can find job postings, and then just pull a bunch of these job postings and kind of collate them together. Now, you want to come up with sort of either what the company says are the criteria, or if there is no criteria, make your own and kind of come up with an amalgamation of what already exists out there in the world. And listen, you didn't hear it from me, but if you're in the position to influence what the criteria are, if your company doesn't have criteria yet, I'd say build that criteria. And then if there's something on there that isn't particularly easy for you to get, leave it off and find out if they notice. You know what I mean? I would give them the criteria that is going to be easier for me to get rather than kind of intentionally stack the decks against me. But you're going to go out nevertheless, whether you find one out in the world and sort of make your own, or whether you have one provided directly, you're going to go and find sort of a job posting. Go and delete kind of anything that's just boilerplate nonsense about the company. Our culture is blah, blah, blah. Those things are useful, but they're not useful for what we're doing here. Anything that's really table stakes things like, we want you to have the same degree that everybody has. Like as a mining engineer, saying I need to have a mining engineering degree. I mean, yeah, I have to have it, but it's not really worth talking about. Delete all that stuff, right? And then we want to be left with sort of what are the key traits that they're looking for in hiring for this role. So here's an example of one for a director of product marketing. So they might want to see, for example, consistent achievement of strategic goals and KPIs. They might want to see good execution of product launches with positive market impact more than once. They might want to see that you can lead and develop a high-performing team. You may want to see that you've had involvement cross-functionally with other teams so that you can influence your peers and then create something that actually had good outcomes as a result. And they might want to also see that your peers recognize you as a good leader and recognize your role as being kind of essential and important to the company. So obviously the job posting that you find will be longer than this, but I want to make sure y'all could read it on the slide. So we've got these 5 to work with as an example. So from here, once you've got this list, what I want you to do is do kind of a stoplight exercise. So you're going to rate all of these items red, yellow, green. So red meaning this is the thing that I'm not doing at all. I can't substantiate this. If my boss in an interview asked me, Holly, tell me about a time when blah, 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 I'd have no story to tell. Yellow is I'm kind of doing it. Like I've done a little bit of that, but I don't know if I've done it really to the level that they're looking for or as many times as they're looking for. If you are somebody who comes from any kind of marginalized background, I highly recommend that anything that you color yellow or red, you get somebody else to check your work and challenge you on it. The number of times I've seen my clients go, oh, Holly, I don't really know if I've like got enough experience doing that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You've done it 45 times. And they're like, yeah, but I haven't done this one tiny aspect of it. And I'm just like, color it green, move on, right? So green is, I'm definitely doing it. No question, I've got this down pat. This would be very easy for me to tell a story about in an interview, or my boss would agree that I'm doing this. So you're going to go through and rate according to this little stoplight rubric. So let's do that here with this made up personality that I'm going to use for this example. So let's imagine here that, yes, I've been hitting my numbers, no problems there. I think I'll be a green on this. I've done a bunch of product launches and they've all gone really well. My team's running like gangbusters, no problems there. They perform really good and they love me as a leader. I haven't really, because I've been so focused on my team and hitting my metrics over the last year, haven't really done a lot of cross-functional work. So that's something I'll probably have to add into the mix. I think my peers generally like me and would say positive things about me. But if I called them all tomorrow and it was do or die, and I sort of, they had the boss on the line for the should we give them the promotion conversation, I'm not 100% that they'd be on board. So I need to maybe shore that up a bit. So if this is the picture that I'm looking at, I know that I've got pieces of this where I'm ready to go, and I've got pieces of this where I've got a little bit of work to do. So then I want you to think about this question. Which of these things is essential to me being just ready to take on the job? So by that, I mean, quite often when you look at job postings like this, there are wish lists. They are the traits that somebody who had been doing this job successfully for 10 years, right? They would be amazing if they could do all of these things. This is not sort of the beginner director level traits. This is the experienced expert director level traits, or the experienced VP traits, right? So I want you to really think about this question. What do I need to do to be just good enough that I can get into this job, not make a mess of it, not screw it up, do it competently, but still be in a place where I've got a lot to learn and grow? Now, go back to that thing and go and circle. We've only got 5 things here. I don't think I'd pick any of these things out, but which of these things do you think is most important, right? You might be able to make a case, depending on the company, that this proactive cross-functional projects might be sort of like, that is important, but it is something I can work on at the next level. Once you've promoted me, it shouldn't stand in the way. So before you even go anywhere else with this, remember, this is all still a personal exercise. I really want you to think critically about which things are essential and which things aren't, because that'll become important later on when we talk to your boss about it. Then I want you to make yourself a green light plan. So figure out how you're going to take anything that's red and yellow and turn those into green lights over the next little while. Now, I don't want you to make just sort of one plan. Brainstorm a whole bunch of ideas. You're going to eventually come and talk to your boss about these, and we want to make sure you've got ideas if the first option you come up with isn't their fave. Okay, so then, spoiler alert, you're going to go and talk to your boss about it. So I want you to get your boss to rate you, same kind of rubric. And there's 2 ways you can do this. And they each have their advantages. You could either sort of hand your boss a blank one and say, hey, rate me from scratch. Or what I tend to prefer, if you think you've got the kind of relationship with your boss where this will work, is I would go, hey, boss, I'm really, as you know, because I've already told you a long time ago, I've been thinking about moving into this VP level position. And I've gone and taken a look at what our internal job recs are for it. And I've gone and sort of highlighted where I think I sit. Here's what I think. Do you agree? What would you change? So what I'm doing here in negotiation speak is I'm anchoring the conversation, right? So sort of in the world of negotiation, what we talk about when we talk about anchoring is if I say to you, hi, I've got a lip gloss for you to buy, how much would you pay for it? Y'all might come up with, answers sort of $5. Maybe if y'all shop at Sephora a lot, you might say $25 or something like that, right? But if I say to you, I've got the world's best lip gloss, it's $100, how much will you offer me for it? Very few of you in the room, some of you would, but very few in the room would say $5. You might now say 50, right? Or you might say, well, 30. Very different than if I said, hey, I've got a lip gloss for you. It costs $2. What would you offer me for it? Right? Then you'll be like, 50 cents, So that sort of initial proposal that you place in a negotiation actually has a really big influence on sort of the realm of possible answers that show up around it. It tends to skew where the conversation goes. So I really love the approach of going with your doc already done and saying, hey, boss, here it is. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Now, if you have a sense that your boss hates your performance or that your assessment might be way off, like if you're somebody who tends to grandiosity or tends to really underrate yourself, that may not actually help you. You may be better off to just hand them the blank page and go from there. But if you don't think either of those are true, I actually really love that approach. So anyways, get your boss to rate you on the same stoplight scale that we used before. And we're going to use the same magic words we used on ourselves. Hey boss, which of these things is essential for me to be just ready to take on the job? Or, like I mentioned, feel free to precede this yourself and anchor it, right? And say, hey boss, I took a look at these things on the list, and I think they're all really important to me being able to do this job really, really well 3 years from now. When I think about what I need to be able to just take on this job and be ready to start it, I think these are the most important, and I think these ones could be developed on the job. What do you think? So feel free to propose that. And actually, that's even a more gentle offering. The risk with this approach, you kind of want to add some extra words around it. The risk with this approach is it sounds like you're like, hi, I'd like to be a slacker. What's the minimum I could do? Right? That's really not the question that we're asking. So if you're worried that that's the thing that your boss might pick up, or if mid-conversation that does appear to be what they're picking up, just feel free to negate that directly in the conversation. Hey, I don't mean this to come across like I'm trying to be lazy or a slacker about this. I just really want to make sure that we're clear about kind of what the most important things are for me to be ready to go and learn and grow, something like that. Okay, so then you're going to have that conversation with your boss so that you two can agree which things are important and which things you could maybe discard. There might be some things. And then you and your boss are going to make that green light plan. And lucky you, you already have a first draft. You could propose it as a first draft, or you can use it to brainstorm ideas as you go. Okay, then once you have a green light plan, the special closer. I quite often talk about negotiation, a little bit facetiously, as a gentle process of trapping your boss. And this is a great example of that. So you're going to say, okay, boss, so if I do the things that we just agreed on in our green light plan, will you be willing to promote me by our next promotion cycle? Now, this is a really important question to ask because it establishes a couple of things. One, it establishes whether you've got all the feedback or not, or whether you need to go back and add some more. Two, it helps you uncover any other things that are in the way. So it might be that they're like, listen, I'll be willing to promote you, but we've got budgets frozen, or but Tom kind of hates you and he's going to block this promotion. So it'll help you identify blockers. And then three, once you've figured out all the blockers and things that need to be moved out of the way, when your boss goes yes, then you can always come back and say, hey, we agreed on this. We're supposed to be doing this by 6 months from now. So how's that going? Right? And it makes it harder for them to later on change the requirements on you. So it's really, really important question, both to establish that you've actually figured everything out and as a tool for moving them forward later on. So my favorite little boss trap, don't forget it. All right, friends, we're 75% of the way there. Oh my God, it's a long slog. We're so tired. We're not sure we want this promotion anymore, but we're going to persevere. Okay, step number 4 is we have to actually go and make it happen. Now that we've brainstormed all these things we have to make better, we got to go do them. So I like to call this the relentless follow-up phase, but it's actually not quite like you might see here, like, hey boss, just checking in on my promotion. Anything changed since yesterday when we last spoke? And your boss is like, oh my God, how do I fire this person? Let me get HR on the phone. Like, I can't have one more conversation about this. So not quite that relentless. But usually what we do is way over on the other end of the spectrum. We go, hey boss, just checking in on my promotion that we talked about in my last performance review. Did either of us do anything about that in the last year? No, nothing, right? So it's really easy to let this slip. It's easy for this to become the last priority. There's always going to be, for your boss and you, things that you're firefighting, other projects that you have on the go. This is usually one of the lowest items on the list. So it's really important that y'all create some structure and be the engine of it moving forward, because your boss often won't be. So there's 2 key tools that I want you to use in making this happen. On top of actually, by the way, doing the work that you agreed to. Okay, that's going to be a key element that I didn't even put in the slides, but obviously go do the green light plan, right? But while you're doing the green light plan, there's these 2 key tools. So number 1 is I always want you to have your next meeting set with your boss. So this is an old sales trick, right? Is that you never leave a meeting without your next meeting set. And obviously you're going to meet with your boss regularly. You're going to have one-on-ones and things like that. But I mean your next meeting specifically pertaining to your promotion, right? So you will see me advise my clients quite often. You will see my clients almost give their bosses homework, right? Where they go, okay, boss, we've got this green light plan. I'm going to go do this. You're going to do this. Let's talk again in 2 weeks. Or, your boss might say, I've got to check with HR. kind of what the procedure looks like for this promotion. You say, great, when can you have that conversation? Who do you need to talk to? Okay, do you think you could talk to Susie 2 weeks from now? Great, let's meet again in 2 weeks and have a conversation about how that went. Even if it didn't go well, we can sort of, update and move on from there. So we want to make sure that we keep the pressure on. We want to make sure that we've got a check-in for kind of every action that we're all going to take. And we want to make sure that we set it up now as opposed to sort of leaving it to set up later, because that's how it tends to slip. So we're going to make sure that we always have our next meeting set with our boss, and a little script that I kind of already gave you is, okay, so you're going to go do this and I'm going to go do this. When should we next meet to discuss this? And feel free, by the way, on that same note of anchoring things yourself, hey, let's meet and talk about this next Tuesday. Are you free at 2 p.m.? Insert a time. They'll just tell you a new one if it doesn't work. Thing number 2 is I want you to be a relentless force for yes. This is going to be such a wonderful gift for your boss, and it might be just like a little bit annoying if they sort of want to go, take their feet off the gas and be a little bit lazy about it. But there's a big difference between can I and how can I? And a lot of us come to these conversations with an attitude of can I? Hey boss, can I get this promotion? Hey boss, can I, work on such and such project that I need to develop this skill, right? And when we're doing that, we have 2 options, yes or no. But in reality, yes is made up of a billion options, right? There's all these different ways to create a yes. I might be able to, develop a skill by working on a specific project, by getting some mentoring, by hiring a coach, by reading a book, by taking a training. My boss may or may not fund any one of those, or I may fund them myself. That's just, I don't know, 6 or 7 strategies for nothing. You know what I mean? So can be really, really limiting because it puts all the power in your boss's hands. If you come from the place of how can I, you're always looking for a way to make the yes go. And that's really where I want you to be. So anytime y'all are making your green light plan or having one of these check-ins where you've gone, okay, so did you talk to so-and-so in HR? How did it go? And they go, oh, I hit a roadblock. Then you're going to sit there and go, okay, you hit that roadblock. How can we get around that? What's our next step? If I am definitely getting a promotion this year, what do we have to do to make that happen, right? So please come at it from that how can I attitude. And here are some scripts you can put in your mouth for that. So you can say to your boss, hey, how can I get experience doing such and such project in the next 3 months? You could say, the next time I do this skill, could you attend the meeting and give me feedback afterwards? You can say, who would you recommend I work with to achieve whatever it is that's going to help your promotion? Or you could say, how else could we do this thing? How else could we make this happen? So this is a really good one when you're both sort of sitting there kind of stumped or your last idea didn't work. You can go, how else could we do this? And then start brainstorming. Even if your boss isn't brainstorming, start coming up with ideas and let them say no. Quite often in the no, you'll find the yes. And so no is not a bad thing as long as you don't let it stop you. And we're going to be a relentless force for yes. All right, friends. We've hit 100. Hooray. The LinkedIn gods are satisfied. We've moved our battery up to 100%. Our profile is complete. So something I want to just leave you with here is that promotions aren't done in a single conversation. As you can see from the last little while that we've been talking, there's a lot of talking you're going to do with your boss over this. It's very rarely going to be the way that I described it in my, that first client that I mentioned earlier in this talk, right? You're going to have lots and lots of working with your boss. And it's really the process of you two getting clear on what the expectations are and then building a plan of how you're going to meet them, right? And by the way, these might be lots of conversations with your boss. These may be conversations outside of just that one-on-one relationship. Quite often, especially as you move up the chain, your ability to get promoted is not just decided sort of by one person, but is quite often contingent on the feelings of your peers, on your overall impression within the company, and kind of what other people perceive your utility to be. So you may not just be having these conversations with your boss, but you may be having similar conversations with other departmental heads and things like that as well. So this won't be a single conversation, but we want to make sure that you've got these 4 key pieces. So 1, actually tell your boss you want the promotion. Don't keep it a secret. It's not going to help you. 2, get your detailed feedback by asking lots of questions of your boss around behavior, impact, and importance. Then benchmark your performance against some kind of external standard, whether that's one that's company internal or company external. And this is a process of really creating an agreement between your boss about these are the things I need to tick to get a yes from you. And then go out and make it happen and follow up like crazy. Be a force for yes and always set your next meeting. All right, friends, the promotion meter has gone from 0 all the way to 100. Hooray, we've done it. If you have any questions, you can reach me in all of these places. I'll also stick around now for some questions for y'all. And if you want to make sure that you never miss any of these amazing talks or other weird insights from me, you can find me in all of these places. On Twitter, very briefly still, we're just moving off of it at Hello Wimdy, via my newsletter at wimdy.com/join us, and also on LinkedIn. All right, friends, I will stop presenting and take some questions now.
Well, from
Okay.
chat, I wanted to jump in really quick because Becky had a great question as far as setting yourself up for success and being very prescriptive with your boss.
Okay.
We've all seen a lot of layoffs and churn and things like that. What happens when your boss leaves, but you have this great plan? You know, do you recommend CCing their boss throughout this process? How do we cover ourselves from that contingency?
It's a great question. So as I mentioned to everybody in this room, these are sort of the 4 key steps. And when I was building this presentation, I literally sat there and I went, how do I present this? Do I present it as a complex flowchart that I can't possibly put on a single slide? And I went, no, that's probably the wrong move, right? And so Becky, the thing that you're talking about is sort of part of that complex flowchart, right? So ideally, what you want to be doing really early on in this process that we didn't cover is you actually want to go and do a bunch of research around what the promotion process looks like at your company and kind of who's involved in saying yes and what the timeline typically looks like and kind of all of that. So one thing is to do that early and then to have that conversation with your boss, even though you know the information, you've done the research, you want to have that conversation with your boss so that your boss is forced to find out. And so often in that process, you'll kind of uncover the thing that we're talking about here, which is that the person above has to be involved. And that will give you the license to include that person along the way. And you can also probably proactively reach out and have those conversations. So I don't mind that strategy of kind of involving the person above you. But I would also say, with your boss, don't have this be a secret. Like, let other folks in the org know that you're doing this, put a lot of this in writing. And then when you get your new boss, I would have that and by the way, involve HR as well. If you have HR at a company that isn't, some companies HR can kind of be the enemy of the people, others can be the helpers of the people. If you don't have the enemy of the people type, involve HR. But when you get your new boss, go and have that conversation with them relatively early and say, hey, I know this is, first week for you. You're probably got your head full of things, but I want you to let you know that I've been working on a promotion plan with the previous boss. Here's what we had agreed on. Here's the plan. This is what I've been working on. Here's where the progress is at. And we're targeting this role by this date. Now, you don't know my performance just yet, but in 2 weeks, I'm going to have a conversation with you. Let's set it up where we can sit down and kind of look at how we've benchmarked this. And you can let me know whether you think there's other skills that I need to develop to be in that role. And then over time, once you get to know me a little bit better, a couple months in, we can sit down and talk about how I'm progressing versus this. So set that conversation up with the boss really early, the new boss. Go, this is the thing that's happening and I'm going to drive it forward, and start to get their agreement on what they think is needed just in terms of requirements for the role. Not necessarily whether you meet them, but just, hey, are we on the same page about what we require? And then as early as you think you can, get them to start benchmarking you and move towards what they think you need to do. Because, to some extent, no matter how involved people are, your new boss is going to have to be a yes to this. So you have to get clear again, and you have to almost start this process over with them around, what do you need to see out of me? What are your feedback for me to move forward? Make sense?
Yes, definitely makes sense. Although it sucks to restart the whole process. So yeah.
Yeah, it does. I worked with somebody a couple of years ago. I actually worked with 2 people who were married and lived together. And one of them had been my client for a very long time. And the other was her wife, who had taken a bunch of time off in the last several years to have their 2 kids. And between having the kids and boss changes and kind of company reorgs, every single time she tried to get promoted, the one that had the kids, every single time she tried to get promoted, it was sort of like, well, I don't know you well enough, or, oh, you were only here for 4 months this year, so I can't really assess your performance. Like, she just got like smacked with variations of that theme for 5 years straight. And by the end of it, her wife was making $30,000 a year more than her. effectively just because of these little things. And so, that became a more complex conversation about, is this really what we want to be doing? Do we want to have this much of a delay? And will this eventually become kind of a human rights complaint here in Canada that it would have been, right? And so, we were able to get her moving up and forward eventually. But those kinds of things where you have a boss change can really upset the apple cart. And so it's important not to sort of go, it'll all work out, because quite often it doesn't. You gotta manage that situation as best you can, or find yourself making $30,000 less than your wife because you had a couple babies, which sucks. Okay, who else has got a question? I see you here in the chat.
So just to keep on the bosses, can I ask a question?
Of course, Angela, go ahead.
My boss's boss has changed their third boss. So
Say
now
that again. Your boss's boss has changed which?
this is her third boss since I've been asking for a promotion.
Your boss has had 3 bosses.
Yes.
Got you. Okay.
So now she's going to be on her third boss as we go into a cycle of performance reviews saying, hey, we need a promotion. This person needs, a senior level position versus just a bog standard position.
Yes.
And I think the feedback is going to be another of the questions that's in the chat. We don't have budget. Budgets are frozen. And it's going to be the same as the last 2.5 years.
Yeah. Okay. So the budgets are frozen piece will be a complicating factor no matter how you slice it, right? I'll give you a couple tips that might help you get around it, but they're not going to be foolproof. You might end up, some companies will go for this, other companies will sort of sit you in Siberia and have you wait, right? But what I would do then is, again, you want to have pre-done a bunch of research up front, right? So something I want to know before I even start having these conversations with my bosses are, what are the pay bands for my current role? What are the pay bands for the role I want to get into, right? Quite often the bands will have some overlap where what they're paying you now, they could keep paying you the same amount to move into the next role. There's going to be risk associated with what I'm about to say. We'll talk about that in a second. But I want to understand, when they say we don't have budget, what really is the objection here? How much are we talking? Is it like we don't have $30,000 worth of budget, so we can't promote you? Is it we don't have $10,000 worth of budget, we can't promote you? Or is it, what I suspect it is, that the pay bands overlap and actually doesn't cost them any money to promote you if they did it a certain way? So first go to understand that yourself, then ask them about it so they have to say it out loud and figure it out for themselves, right? And I think you can probably, again, there's risk, negotiate a situation where you get promoted, and for the first 6 months, they sort of assess your performance and there is no raise associated with it. And you could either peg that on performance and say, listen, once I start performing in this role, pay me at that level. So if you have a boss that's reluctant to promote you, that can be a tool. Might also work in the budget scenario, or you can say, promote me, and then when budget's unfreeze, we'll look at giving me a raise then, or we'll look at giving me a raise with back pay. Or something else you can do, depending on the type of role you can have, is you can make more of your role variable comp. So it could be more commission, could be more bonus, could be more, equity of some kind, right? So that allows them to cushion themselves from some risk, right? They're not on the hook to pay you a massive base salary if budgets being frozen is usually related to the company not making enough money, right? And so you can often kind of undo that by tying it that way. Now, couple tactics you can use. Some companies won't go for it because they perceive correctly that it creates a bit of a trap for them and for you. And they don't like the trap for themselves. The trap for themselves is that they, by promoting you, will have given you leverage to argue for that higher pay, because now you're in a new band and you can go, I'm performing in this band. So they give away something valuable in doing that, right? You also give something away valuable here too, which is that the number one time you'll be able to negotiate is when you switch into a new role. It's going to be harder for you to make the case that they should pay you more for the job that you've already been doing happily at a lower paying job, especially when it was your idea. But if you're somebody who's going, it's really important for me to get this promotion, that's important to my career growth, I want it on my resume, and I'm going to be leaving in a year or two anyways, and I'm kind of okay to take the hit on pay if I can get the title so that next time I can get paid exactly where I want to be, then that can be a strategy you can employ. Is that helpful, Angela?
Yes, very helpful. Thank you, Holly.
Right. I'm curious to see, Angela, what you do. Tell me afterwards.
Yes.
Drop me a note. Okay, other questions from folks?
How does your approach differ when it is more of a title and projects promotion versus promoting out of an entry-level role into a management role? So essentially, them needing to backfill you with the promotion. How does that differ when you're looking at those different types of promotions?
Okay, Maria, I was following you up until the thing about backfill. Tell me a little more about this backfill piece. I'm not sure I got it.
Yeah. So, like if you're an individual contributor and you're looking to move into a management role, so they still need an individual contributor. So it would be an increase in headcount or a realignment of duties.
Yeah. And so, sorry, what's the question then? How do I handle that?
Yeah. How does your approach differ if you know that the company is going to need to do things beyond just you for this
Yes.
promotion?
Yeah. Okay, so this is sort of in line with what we were talking about earlier with, who was it, James? I don't think he's here anymore. Too bad, James. We're going to talk about the thing you mostly need now. But yeah, so Marie, I'm going to separate this into two pieces because you're sort of talking about, you know, if you're moving from an IC to a manager role, right? And so there's a scenario wherein the manager role exists and it's just vacant now, but they kind of always intended to fill it with somebody. And that's thematically different from a situation where that manager role or whatever the next role up doesn't exist and you're advocating for it to exist and then you fill it. So that's a net new headcount versus the other one is an existing headcount they're just now filling with you. I'm going to talk to the net new headcount thing. So this process is a lot more complex because not only do you have everything I just talked to you guys about making the case that you belong in that role, but you actually have to pitch the value of the role itself, right? And so this is often a little more complex. You're going to have to usually create a business case for it, really detail out, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's the kind of, not for every role, but I think if you can do this, you're in much better shape. Here's the kind of revenue that this role is going to create, or here's the kind of cost it's going to save. For those of you who were here last week, all those things around the business alien that we talked about and the business value Venn diagram are going to be your friend in crafting how you talk about that next role. For those of you who weren't, there's going to be a webinar recording of the webinar I did last week. Or I'll share in the chat later on a link I have to a talk I've done about business cases that might be helpful to y'all. But you're going to need to make the case for why this role should exist. And you're also going to have to understand who needs to be able to approve this. Now, this is going to be almost certainly people within the line of your department, right? So for y'all, marketing most likely, right? It's also almost certainly going to be HR where things go to die quite often, right? And then it might also be people at the very top, depending how high up this role is. You might have to convince the C-suite. You know, my partner recently made a case like this over the last year, which was very fun for me. It was like the negotiation Olympics in my house. I loved it. But he made a case to create a director role in his org, which is an org of one up until this point. And then he goes, and I want to be the director of nobody. So it was a really challenging ask because he was creating the ask for that position to exist, helping the company to see the value he could create if he could function at that level. And then also making the case for a couple of hires underneath him to take his work off his plate and move him up there. So it was really a lot of dollar value associated with it. And he had to kind of make that case, but he had to make that case to everybody at the C level at his company. And really what you have to do there is come up with your pitch and then go and socialize it to every single person and get the yes from every single person, so that you kind of have the meeting before the meeting, so that when they come around to actually going to approve it, everybody else is already a yes. And that process, the key thing that you're going to want to be able to do other than make the pitch effectively is uncover objections. So that's like a negotiation technique where you're going to be asking questions to understand what it is that the other party is not a full yes to yet. So the key thing that will hinge, your success will hinge on, is your ability to uncover objections and then either undo them or meet them or solve for them, right? So that you can get your yes out of these multiple parties. So when you're doing a role like this, key big steps are kind of map out who all the decision makers are, build a business case that aligns with each of their interests, because you're going to pitch kind of what's in it for them, right? And then from there, get really, really good at getting in conversation, understanding what their objections are, fixing those objections. And then just like we had here with your boss, where you're checking in and going, you know, how's this going? I mean, something we didn't talk about much in the presentation, but that I really do want to have be part of this for all of y'all is, you know, I gave you that idea of like, come up with your benchmarking doc, right? Part of the reason why I want you to come up with your benchmarking doc is because you get to go back to your boss later and go, look, I did the thing. Let's tick it off together. Aren't I wonderful, right? And then your boss goes, yes, you are wonderful. And so you kind of all have this moment of agreement that like, yes, the thing we wanted is solved. And you're going to have to create those moments with each person that you're influencing as well. So tons of words. Let me pause. Is that a helpful bit of context for you in that question?
Yes, certainly. I think that what you described of what your partner's trying to do is very akin to the situation that I'm at. So yeah, I think that was really helpful. It's a challenge, right, to get all of those stakeholders aligned, certainly in
Yes.
customer marketing when our role overlaps pretty much everyone. So
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't get to just carve out a piece and go, this is mine, and I don't have to convince anybody of it. You actually have to convince everybody of every single thing, right?
Mhm. yes,
And
thank
you know, one thing that's good about that, well, it might be good about that sometimes, is if they have an interest in what you're doing, sometimes that can enhance their interest in blocking it, but sometimes it can make it easier for you to articulate what's in it for them. Whereas, you know, when you have something that's completely separate, you can have somebody going like, look, I don't care about this. I don't want to spend any time on it. Like, I don't want to talk about this. And I'm, you know, I'm kind of a no just because you rub me the wrong way. It's much harder to get over that. If you've got something in common, that actually gives you a good place to start, even as they can be more interested. It can often be easier to overcome the objections once you find them. And Marie and anybody else in this room, you know, if you've got tough situations like that where, you know, it's going to require a bunch of strategy going forward, you know that I'm somebody that you can hire for that. There's other folks as well who do similar work to me, but you want help on sort of the negotiation elements or how you pitch those ideas, how you make those cases. I do that work with clients all the time, and happy to hop on a call with you, even just have an initial chat. I do free half-hour chats, so I can stick a link in the chat for anyone that wants it. I'll do that right now. All right, Kyle, do we have time for any more questions, or are we done for today?
We are now at the top of the hour, so I will be sure to share this recording with all of you who attended live, and then we'll also be posting this on our YouTube channel as well. So we'll make sure this link is available to you. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
everybody. Good luck. Send me notes.
Thank
Let me
you.
know if you get your promotions. I want to hear all about it. I live and die for these kinds of moments. I just love it when people get promoted. I love all the ins and outs of it. I just finished watching Succession, you know, and I was like so done in by the politics of it all. And yeah, anyone here who wants to share with me the story of how this goes, just know that I'm keen to hear it. I always want to know.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.